Hi. Methane is considered to cause the second most global warming of the atmospheric gases. The flame on this chart shows that it contributes more than ozone, which is enhanced by pollutants, and also more than the fluorinated gases and nitrous oxide. Looking at these curves showing the output of radiation from the surface of the Earth at different temperatures, we have discussed in earlier videos that the bending motion of the molecule absorbed much of this radiation, around 1000 reciprocal centimeters, or wave numbers as the units are also called. The bending motion of methane is somewhat higher in frequency, but still it is in this crucial region. Overall, methane has a much higher radiative efficiency than CO2, and as a result, the 20-year global warming potential is over 80 times higher. This amplifies the radiative forcing that it has over its relative concentration as compared to CO2. The annual emissions of the three classes of greenhouse gases over the last 30 years have followed different patterns. The fluorinated gases started at a very low level, as they're almost all synthetic. It's what we've made. And their rise has been steady, but with an increased slope since 2000. Nitrous oxide started with a much higher background level, but the slope has been rather less. For methane, the background level into this millennium was the highest of these three, but the slope since 2000 has also been the highest. We can understand there being a background when we think about part of the carbon cycle. In our world, we have oxygen as an atmosphere which is active, and we have air and sunlight. If we start with carbon dioxide, with the sunlight and the water, photosynthesis can occur to reduce the CO2 to carbohydrates, sugar residues, and give oxygen as a rather important byproduct. Some plants store carbohydrates like starch in tubers. Some plants are eaten and are digested by animals. In the case of a ruminant, then the digestion takes place where there is not much fresh air. And in other degradation sites like muds, there may also be oxygen deficient spaces. And from these sites, the carbohydrates break down into acetic acid and also CO2 and hydrogen. The ground can be rid of unwanted carbon deposits this way, and these products are expelled into the atmosphere, affording water, CO2, and methane. Once in the atmosphere with oxygen and sunlight, then the methane can be transformed into CO2 again. But how does this extra methane emerge too? This pie chart shows the proportion of the sectors which emit methane. CO2 is also given. For CO2, by far the largest sector was energy, but unsurprisingly agriculture is also a high producer of methane, and emissions from waste are also pretty significant. Unsurprisingly then, a key target in strategies envisaged to limit global warming to 1.5 C by 2100 is to achieve a rapid reduction in methane emissions to get back towards the background concentration. Estimates from the International Energy Agency, the IEA, are that methane emissions from oil and gas are about 80 million tonnes per year, equivalent to about 570 million tonnes of CO2, 40% natural and about 60% anthropogenic or man-made. Gas flaring amounted to about 175 million tonnes of CO2e, and here the gas is burnt to form CO2. The energy from that is released into the atmosphere, but at least the more potent greenhouse gas is substituted. And this has been reduced by about 50 million tonnes of CO2e since 2003. But the targets are about 20 million tonnes of CO2e. It must be a priority for the reduction in flaring together with reduction in leaks around extraction sites. Let's think why we don't just switch to hydrogen now. After all, when that is burnt, the sole product is water. In 2018, the primary energy consumption was nearly 14,000 million tonnes of oil equivalent, or TOEs. Renewables amounted to just about 4% of that, and hydroelectric a further 7%. The production of hydrogen gas is mostly from methane, and virtually all is for chemical use, mostly as ammonia for fertilizer application. It would need a huge increase in more renewable hydrogen simply to replace the current use of natural gas. But what about replacing fossil fuels by biogas? This would have a double gain. The gas does not release the energy of the ancient sunlight, and it would capture more methane from waste sites and agriculture, rather than have it emitted into the atmosphere. The composition of biogas is rather different from UK grid gas. In terms of fuel, it is rather thinner. There's more CO2. So another upgrading step is required. The first UK grid gas started in October 2010, with the Didcot sewage works being the source, supplying about 200 homes. Another example is the Ecotricity project for green gas mills using grass cuttings, and that aims to provide fuel for about 4,000 homes. These are relatively small scale, but all of these give pointers for the future. This plot shows the estimates of the changes in methane emissions since 1990 in 28 European countries. There has been a reduction of about 2.5 million tonnes of methane annually in that time. Most of it has been in the brown data, that is the digestive processes of livestock. And so far there have been small reductions in the light coloured blocks, which is termed manure management. Much of the emissions are due to food production, which causes atmospheric demands as well as requiring considerable energy and water input. Our own methane footprint will be a function of our diet and also how well we avoid food waste. There's a double whammy with food waste. The overproduction is compounded by the methane emission of the waste food. Finally, there is much methane trapped in cold storage, in the permafrost, and in very cold seawater. It is estimated that there are about 1,500 billion tonnes stored that way. With warming, some of this is released, hence the fires in Siberia in recent years. And this is a source of positive feedback. The more warming, the more greenhouse effect. Everything we do to get to and below carbon zero helps keep some methane locked away.